Well, hey there, and welcome to Wedding Planning Simplified. Happy Thanksgiving. It is Thanksgiving Sunday, and I am so excited to be here with you today just to quickly talk about how to choose your bridesmaid's attire. Now, if you don't have bridesmaids, totally cool. A lot of what I'm going to say here applies to both sides of the wedding party, although we are going to do a deep dive into groomsmen's attire on October the 30th. We are going to be talking with Ron from Moores, who's going to fill us in all about how to choose your groomsmen's attire. But I did want to pop in today and talk about just generally color schemes and how to choose attire for the bride's side of the wedding party, if there is a bride. And if it happens to be a mixed side of the party, totally cool. We've got bridesmaids, we've got bridesmen, we've got all of the people in all of the places. And that's the great thing about weddings these days, is that you know what? There really aren't any rules. So thank you as always for joining me. I'm Amy from Unmistakably You here in London, Ontario. I'm a wedding planner and an educator here in town. And I always enjoy when you pop into the comments and say hi, or just let me know you're here. If you have any questions about anything, I'm more than happy to cover those in our discussion here. Or if you're catching us on the replay and you have a question, don't hesitate to pop it into the comments or send me an email, amy@unmistakably.you.com. So crossing my fingers that all of my tech works here, I have some visuals for you today because I always am a fan of pictures and I'm a very visual person and I like to be able to see things as I'm talking about them. So if you are in the position where you are starting to think about choosing a color scheme for your wedding, or perhaps attiring your bridesmaids or wedding party side of non-specific sex, hopefully I'll say something today that will help you out. So the first thing we want to think about is whether or not my next slide is going to show up. There we go. The first thing that we want to think about is really, really quickly how to choose and communicate with your wedding party. Now, I am not here to tell you who to pick and who not to pick, but I do have a couple of things to say based on my experience and the number of years that I've been in the industry, things that I've seen with my couples and the wedding parties that they've chosen. Then I want to talk about choosing colors. And then, of course, there's the question recently whether your wedding party should match or not match. And this is something that has kind of become a little bit more popular in the last number of years. You don't have to be as matchy-matchy as wedding parties used to be. So lots of options, and hopefully we will just start to skim the surface, and then there are lots of places that you can go from here. Now, I could do a whole other live, and I have done, and I will do again, about who to choose for your wedding party. If you haven't yet done that, I just suggest that you think about a couple of things. I can't tell you the number of times over the years where I've had couples or brides or either part of the couple realistically who is stressed out because of their wedding party. And we know that it's not always an easy decision. We know that sometimes you're getting some family pressure to have siblings or cousins in your wedding party. We know that sometimes there might be some existing tensions, but you feel pressure to have your sister or your sister-in-law in the wedding party. But if you are at a point where you are still just initially choosing that wedding party, I would suggest to you that if there are existing tensions, they're not going to get better over the course of your engagement and wedding planning process. And if there are family dynamics that you can potentially avoid or push back against, it's going to serve you better in the long run if you can avoid having people in your wedding party that there are existing tensions between, or who are going to try to push you in one way or another. Ideally, to be honest with you, I love a small wedding party because it feels to me like it's a little bit more manageable. Those dynamics aren't quite so overwhelming. And usually it's a little bit more calm, to be honest, when you have less people sort of pushing you in different directions. So if you're still choosing your wedding party and you can think about some of those things, awesome. If not, that's okay. We'll figure out how to help you through a large wedding party with lots of people who have lots of opinions. So you'll want to think about, particularly when you're starting to choose your wedding attire, how you're going to communicate with your wedding party and realistically which options you're going to give them, or if you're going to give them any options. Now, just for simplicity's sake, I've kind of broken this down into a situation where you have a wedding party who is kind of opinionated, or maybe you have one or two high flyers on your wedding party who are going to try to make it all about them and who are going to give you all of the reasons why you should do things their way, versus the opposite end of the spectrum, which is where you have a really accommodating wedding party. And that sometimes is great. And it sometimes is even more challenging because you don't have any strong opinions. So neither one of these is good or bad or right or wrong, but you'll want to think about the sort of dynamics of the people that you have on your team before you really start to make too many decisions or decide what kind of attire they're going to be wearing, or whether you're going to have a conversation with them about it. So depending on the dynamics on that wedding team, it's going to determine how you choose to communicate with them. So if you happen to have some opinionated members on your team, you'll probably want to limit their input, because you know that if you have a lot of people who want a lot of different things, it's just going to devolve into a fight. Every time you try to have a discussion, it's going to turn into, well, I want this and she wants that. And all of a sudden now we're tense and nothing is fun anymore. I would also suggest, if you have a lot of opinionated people on your team, that you don't actually take your whole wedding party shopping with you. Maybe you kind of focus your desires and your wants and you limit their options. Maybe you have one maid of honor or one trusted person that you can kind of bring into the inner circle and help to make those decisions with you. But you always want to go into this kind of a situation with a really clear idea of what you want, and maybe just don't even open it up to opinions from everyone else, because you don't want your ideas to get swayed or derailed by the desires of someone else who happens to have a really clear vision on your wedding team. I would suggest, if you, again, have some of those really big personalities, that you avoid opening one of those cans of worms that starts with a "what do you want to do?" kind of a question. So if you can really focus your vision and kind of tell your wedding party how it's going to be, if you can be really decisive, it's going to eliminate some of that strife and that heartache that's going to result from too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, on the other hand, if you happen to have a really accommodating wedding party, you still will have to go into this with a really clear idea of what you want, because in this case, you might get a lot of, "oh, it doesn't matter," or "oh, whatever you want." And so you have to have a really clear focus and a really clear vision so that you can help to direct those kinds of personalities on your wedding party. In this situation where your wedding party is likely to be a little bit more flexible and accommodating, you are going to want to be really mindful of what's flattering for different body types and different skin tones, because it would be easy to say, we're all wearing this color or we're all wearing this cut. And someone might not be comfortable in that color or that cut, but they might not be as willing to speak up as if they were on the other side of the fence where they're really opinionated, because they just want to make you happy. They know that it's your wedding day and they want you to get what you want. But you still don't want your wedding party to be uncomfortable, to be, you know, to be just uncomfortable in what they're wearing, to feel like they're too exposed or that the color isn't flattering. So in this situation, you might want to take your whole wedding party dress shopping with you and try lots of different options. And that will give you the idea and the sort of um, the ammunition to make more of a decision. You might not have a really clear vision going in. And so it might be necessary to take people shopping and to see what different cuts and different colors look like on everyone. But just be mindful always that you're never going to be able to keep everyone happy. But ultimately, you're going to try and help guide them towards decisions that work for everybody. And that may be something different than what you envisioned right off the bat. And that's okay. This is a process. And anytime you bring other people into things, it's going to morph and it's going to change. And your vision might have to adapt a little bit. But you need to know which parts of your vision can adapt and which parts of your vision you're not willing to let go of. So if you have a color palette in mind that's really important to you, maybe you stick to that color palette, but you're a little bit more flexible on the cut or the style of the dresses that your wedding party ends up choosing. Now, when it comes to choosing colors, there are lots and lots of different ways that you can do this, and there's no one right way. There's no guarantee that the colors you choose now are going to be colors that you love in 10 years, but that's okay. Your wedding is happening now, and you need to make the best decisions based on what you're working with at this particular moment. A really popular way to choose colors is by season. So if you are getting married in the fall, maybe you choose those deep jewel tones, those really rich fall colors. If you have a theme, maybe you're doing a Paris theme, and so black and white are going to work really well. Or maybe you're doing a beach theme, and so blues or greens are going to be really suited to your color palette and your theme. If you're looking for colors that are trending, you're going to be able to find lots of dresses in those colors, lots of options. If you're choosing a Pantone color of the year, or if you're choosing something that a lot of other couples have been choosing for this year and the past seasons, you're going to be able to find lots of options. Maybe you want to choose something neutral so that your wedding pictures endure and they're not dated in the future. There are lots and lots of ways that you can actually choose your colors, and there's no right, there's no wrong. But I do caution you to keep in mind the colors that are flattering on all skin tones or most skin tones. Think about your wedding party and think about the fact that they all have different skin tones. And if you put them all in the same color, will it be equally flattering to all of them? And then think about what will or won't appear dated when you look back on your photos. And there's no guarantee. I mean, I'm sure that my mother, when she got married, didn't think, oh, I'm choosing these floral bridesmaids dresses that are going to be really dated in 10 years. But they are. Love you, Mom. It was beautiful for 1977. But, try and think about maybe what is going to stand the test of time when you're looking for colors. Essentially, I kind of see it as you have 4 different options for attiring your wedding party. You can choose the same dress in different colors. You can choose a different dress in the same color. You can choose the same dress in the same color, or you can choose a different dress in a different color. And I mean, there are variations we could talk about for years, but we won't. Our purposes today are to try and streamline the process. So ultimately, regardless of which way you choose to go, the idea here is that there will be something unifying that helps your wedding party to appear cohesive. So if you're choosing the same dress in different colors, it's the style that's unifying. If you're choosing a different dress in the same color, obviously it's the color that's unifying. And then if you're choosing a different dress in a different color entirely, then you have to have something that really helps those dresses, or dresses and suits, depending on whether you have male and female in your wedding party. But you need to choose something that is going to be similar between different styles and different colors. So maybe it's a similar length, a similar cut, a similar color palette. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. Now, a word about bridesmen. If you happen to have a man of honor or bridesmen in your party, there are definitely some ways that you can think about to keep them as unified as possible while still keeping them distinct from any male members of your partner's party. And the great thing is, again, we don't have any rules. You can have girls and guys on both sides. It really doesn't matter. But presumably, you'll want to find a way to make the whole whole wedding party appear cohesive, and then to make your side of the wedding party appear cohesive. So if you do have bridesmen on your side of the party, you can choose to attire them in the same color as female members of the wedding party. Now, this is going to be easier if the female members of your wedding party are in a neutral color, like a black or a gray or a navy or perhaps even a tan. If you've chosen a burgundy or a peach or a coral or something like that, it's probably going to be difficult to find a suit that is that exact same shade of coral, and perhaps not all that inspiring for that bridesman to wear either. So what you may want to do then is just choose accessories that match the female members of your wedding team. So if your female members are attired in royal blue dresses, like the center photo here, perhaps you put your bridesmen in royal blue ties and pocket squares and a neutral color of suit. Now, you could choose to have your male members of the bridesmaids party match the male members on the other side. You could have all of the men in the same color of suit, which is certainly going to be easier in terms of sourcing those suits. But if that's the case, you might choose to have them wear different flowers, or again, accessorize differently, or as in the far right photo on this slide, every member of the bride's team here is wearing coral accessories or coral dresses, and every member of the groom's team is wearing blue accessories or blue dresses. So you may choose a different color for either side of the wedding party and just attire your bridesmen appropriately. Now, if you want to choose a pattern for your wedding party to wear, that can be super fun. It can work really well. It can also be a hot mess. So I kind of harken back to what I said before about wanting to make sure that there are certain elements that are unified. So if you are choosing a pattern, perhaps you choose that same pattern for all of your wedding party. And that appears in a couple of these pictures. The top ones are very similar patterns, if not exactly the same. The bottom left photo here has some bridesmaids in patterns and some bridesmaids in solids, but the palette is very, very cohesive. So the actual tone is very similar in terms of the colors in the patterned dresses versus the colors in the solid dresses. And the actual saturation is very similar too. So we don't have one really bright, vibrant jewel tone and one really pale pastel. So it's very unifying in that all of those dresses are pastels. And that's the same thing that's happening in the bottom right photo. They're all pastels. They're all different patterns, but it still works because they're very similar in saturation and as well in cut. So most of those dresses are T-length or longer, and the cut is very similar. The patterns are all also a similar scale. So you don't have some very large floral patterns and some very small, tight floral patterns. They're all pretty similar, and that's why that works. So bottom line, if you're choosing different colors, different cuts, different patterns, you need to have something unifying so that it doesn't just look like people went and bought dresses or suits completely exclusive of yourself and them, and they just showed up in whatever they showed up in, because that can be scary. Top left here, we've got a kind of Easter barf wedding. I'm sure that, I mean, this is very commonly seen in my mom's day. Again, love you, mom. All of these different pastels. Now, what they do have working for them here is that they're all the same style. It's just a very dated style. So this can work, again, if you choose a current style and if you keep your saturations similar. The rest of the dresses on this page, I mean, they do have some unifying elements in terms of length. My biggest concern is always with tone. And this, again, is such a unique personal thing. You may look at some of these pictures and say, that's beautiful. That's what I want my wedding to look like. And that is awesome. It is super open to do whatever you want. There are no wedding police. But my concern with the others of these pictures is just that the tone isn't always the same. There are some jewel tones, some pastels. There are different shapes going on with the dresses. Most of the lengths are similar, which is what I think makes them arguably work. But you could also argue that they don't work because of the difference in saturation of color, some patterns, some not. But again, to each his own. So there are no wedding police. The best tips that I can give you are to stay focused on your priorities. So try to limit the noise if you have a lot of opinionated wedding party members. Try as best you can to limit their input. If you are mismatching, whether that's with color, style, or pattern, keep some elements consistent. So the length, the color or the saturation, the palette, and the cut. If you know about yourself that you are going to be stressed about everybody doing their own thing and choosing their own dress, then maybe you want to stipulate the same dress, the same shoes, the same color, the same jewelry, if you know that you are going to want to micromanage all of that. Whereas if you're a little bit more laissez-faire and you know that you're going to be okay with bridesmaids or bridesmen showing up in whatever they show up in, then give them the flexibility and the freedom while still keeping a couple of things consistent, like color, style, cut, that sort of thing. And if you have a wedding party where the dynamic is a little bit more out there, and maybe you're going to have a lot of opinionated people, avoid too many opinions from the get-go and just focus the vision for your wedding party and then give them that vision and they can work within the rules that you've set. As always, I encourage you, if you have any questions or thoughts or concerns, to contact me at any point. I am available by email, amy@unmistakably.you.com. You can put a comment in this video, and I look forward to seeing you next week, October 16th. We're going to be talking with Tamara from Savvy Bridal Boutique about how it looks to purchase a wedding dress on consignment. So something really interesting that we haven't actually talked about here before. So I encourage you to join us next week. We'll be here with Tamara. And as always, have a great week, happy planning, and happy Thanksgiving. Take care. Bye-bye.